And we continue at 2:06 in the afternoon. Talk Radio 790 KABC, The John Phillips Show. Broadcasting live from the Morongo Casino Resort and Spa Living Room Studios. Mr. Randy Wangs at the sports desk in Culver City.
John, and people are wondering just how mindful was Gavin Newsom yesterday?
Very mindful of our history, but I'm very mindful and sober, but I'm very mindful of that.
Oh, he's mindful and sober now.
You know, our union president, Fran Drescher, wasn't mindful. She was all the way pissed off earlier today.
I cannot believe it, quite frankly.
It's already in the running for drop of the year, people. Get your ballots in now.
We'll have that election close to Christmas. 800-222-KABC is the telephone number, 1-800-222-5222. It is our pleasure to welcome our next guest to the program. She is the woman who is the attorney representing the plaintiffs who are suing the fake doctor and the L.A. County Department of Public Health for ruining all of our lives during the COVID-19 pandemic and eliminating our ability to speak about the subject freely. You can follow her on Twitter at Hamill_law and get her online at laparents.org. Julie Hamill, welcome.
Thank you for having me on.
Okay, so you've already deposed the fake doctor, and we had you on, and we talked about that, and we played some of the sound. I believe some of the hits from that deposition were that she did not know what her PhD was in, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so that was chapter one. After the fake doctor was deposed, you then got to depose Brett Morrow, he, him, his, who is the communications officer for the L.A. County Department of Public Health. This has been a long time in the making. Certainly there was some time in between the deposition of the fake doctor and the deposition of Brett Morrow, but that deposition did in fact happen. Am I right?
Yes, it did.
Okay, tell us all about that.
Well, there was a delay in time between the Ferrer deposition and the Morrow deposition because I went in to request sanctions against the attorney for the county for locking my client out of the deposition for 3 hours and then pretending that she was a security risk and excluding her from ever being able to enter. The judge denied my motion for sanctions, and I got in trouble for accusing the attorney of being dishonest. So that didn't go well. But
wait a minute, he's an attorney for Ferrer. Isn't that part of the job description?
No comment. I have to reserve comment on my observations of counsel. I'll focus on Mr. Morrow. So we took the deposition of Mr. Morrow on Friday, and this time I was accompanied by Roxanne Hogue, who is a member of the Alliance of Los Angeles County Parents and a wonderful woman. I think she's been on your show before.
Absolutely.
And counsel for the county attempted to kick her out, but we held the deposition on my turf this time, and he wasn't allowed to physically remove her, and so he stopped trying to fight me on it. So Roxanne was able to sit in and watch everything unfold. Mr. Morrow was wearing a very large face mask throughout the entire deposition. And when I asked him if he always wears a mask, he told me, no, not really, just when he's around people he doesn't know. So I think he perceived me as some sort of dirty person or threat.
Well, it's like Ferrer.
Yeah,
she always wears it in empty rooms, but when she goes to rock concerts, that's when she can let her hair down.
Oh, yeah. Well, and I thought it was really interesting. I was preparing for the deposition, and I went through Mr. Morrow's public Instagram account and found his wedding photos from October 2021. And it was an indoor venue in Los Angeles County and not a mask in sight, which I found pretty hypocritical given at that point I was fighting for my children to be unmasked while they were at school.
Do we know if Ferrer attended the ceremony?
I didn't see her in any of the photos, but I don't know for sure.
Probably got lost in the mail, the invitation.
Probably. So yeah, my Brett Morrow came across as a nice guy. Just I had the same reaction to meeting Barbara Ferrer, where I expected to have some sort of deep hatred and resentment for these people who have really wrecked the lives of so many children and families in Los Angeles County. But he came across as nice, somewhat aloof, incredibly incompetent. And he reminded me of Ronald from Jury Duty. He had a very similar appearance, although I couldn't really tell because he had a giant mask on his face. But he was kind, he was polite, but it was clear to me that he is, I feel bad saying this because he's so nice, that he's incredibly incompetent and stupid.
And his job at the LA County Department of Public Health is to handle all communication. So I would imagine that includes any press avails that the fake doctor gives, their social media accounts, any press releases that come out from that office. Is that pretty much what he does over there?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, when you started talking to him about his job descriptions and his qualifications, if I recall correctly, he spent a lot of time working in politics but didn't really have a background in public health. Was that true?
That is correct. He started out working for Adam Schiff's campaign and then worked in Adam Schiff's office as his communications director, I believe. I can't remember exactly his title. And then he jumped around to a few different congressional offices before coming to work for the county.
Okay. Now, Barbara Ferrer is a strange one to work for if you're running communications, because it seems like if you do something she doesn't like, you're dead to her. So she doesn't do a lot of press. She got very angry at Alex Michelson on Fox 11 when he pressed her on her qualifications. I don't believe she's been on Fox 11 since then. Our own Jim Roop asked her about her qualifications at one of her press conferences. I don't believe he's been called on since then. The only one who ever asked challenging questions who continues to get called on is Marla Tejas from Fox 11, and that's only because Marla is an absolute workhorse and shows up to these press conferences when other people in the press corps do not, and it would be hard to ignore her if she's the only one there and she has questions and they don't want to answer them. What did he say his life was like on a day-to-day basis running communications for Barbara Ferrer?
He didn't give me a real day-to-day basis explanation of his life, but I did find out that he did admit to trying to kill stories about, negative things that would come out about public health or that sort of controverted whatever message Barbara was trying to send. But then he also admitted to not being very good at that. So he did a lot of monitoring of media. We talked about you a little bit. He knows exactly who you are. He talked about the heated exchange he had with Alex Michelson on Twitter from his personal account. I don't know if you remember that exchange, but Alex Michelson said something on Twitter about how they had invited Barbara Ferrer on their show multiple times and she refused. And then Brett Morrow got very defensive and sent a few heated tweets back to Alex. So we went over that, and that's going to be on the transcript, which I'm hoping to get in the next week or so.
What did he say about me? Because I know that it was in the email that he sent to Adam Schiff's office and to Twitter that they seemed to be very upset that I refer to Ferrer as the fake doctor. What did he have to say about me and my coverage?
So I was asking a question. I was looking at that email, and I said something about the Johnny Don't Like Twitter account, which belongs to John Phillips. And his lawyer objected and says, there's no proof that this belongs to John Phillips. Objection, blah, blah, blah. And Brett interrupted the lawyer and said, oh, no, that's John Phillips. I know John Phillips. And And I asked him, well, how do you know who John Phillips is? And he says that you tweet at him a lot, something along those lines. And I could tell he was smiling under his giant mask. But that's about it. We didn't really get into too many details about that. But he knows exactly who you are, and he helps me out with my line of questioning by interrupting his own lawyer.
So I'm sure the questions had something to do with their efforts to silence me on social media for my negative coverage of their mask mandates and Barbara Ferrer and her capabilities. Why did he go to Adam Schiff's office to try to censor me? Why did he go to Twitter?
Well, first I asked him, why did you go to Patrick Boland? So Patrick Boland is the chief of staff for Adam Schiff. And I asked him, why did you reach out to Patrick Boland for this issue? And he said, because Patrick Boland knows everybody, in a very sort of dark and evil way. And so what he told me, and this was clearly coached by the lawyer, he told me that he was merely reaching out to Twitter to make sure that they were following their policies and that they were applying their policies. And he said that he had tried to report all of these objectionable tweets, but he wasn't sure if the reports actually got through. There might have been an error because nothing happened to these tweets that he didn't like, and he would report them. And so he just wanted to make sure that Twitter was following its policies. So he went to the highest level of Twitter, invoking the name of the chair of the Select Committee on Intelligence for the United States House of Representatives, and called out all of his opponents. And he used the words anti-maskers and opponents in his request to Twitter to have these things taken down.
In his email to Twitter, one of the items, or the item at the top of the list, was me referencing Ferrer as a fake doctor. How did he come to the conclusion that that was disinformation?
I can't remember exactly what he said, but it was a relatively intelligent answer. And I know he was coached. Something about taking away from the credibility of Barbara Ferrer and encouraging people to doubt whatever it was she was saying.
So that seems very Fauci-esque to me, where Fauci said, I am the voice of science. And it almost seems as if he was of the belief that Ferrer was the voice of science, and anyone who questioned her credibility was not following the science and therefore delivering misinformation. Is that an accurate read of what he said? Exactly. So if you apply that to reality, essentially the point he's making is that any criticism of Ferrer or that office is out of bounds and should be censored.
That's exactly right.
So was he the one in charge of taking down the ability to comment on their social media posts on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram?
Yes, he was.
And that was the explanation he gave, that there was too much criticism of their office?
His explanation is that there were threats which have never been identified. He couldn't identify a single threat. Harassment and misinformation. And misinformation includes anything that is contrary to whatever was coming out of Barbara Ferrer's mouth. So even he referred a lot to the accusations that the hospitalization numbers were inflated, case numbers were inflated, and deaths were inflated as being misinformation because they conflicted with the Department of Public Health's numbers. And so he was very concerned about that information being out in the public.
Okay, so if he's saying that they were the victim of threats and they were the victim of things that clearly crossed the line, why didn't he include those tweets when he reached out to the highest levels of Twitter? He didn't include any of those. He included mine. I believe mine was the only one he included, in fact.
It's a really good question. And he was unable to remember any specific threat, and he was unable to recall ever contacting law enforcement.
What kind of relationship after talking with him for several hours, do you think he has with Ferrer? Because what I've heard, and I talked to many people in that office, it's how we've certainly, been provided with information that have helped us put pieces of the puzzle together as to just exactly how things operate in that office. But a lot of them don't have a lot of respect for her. They don't like her. They don't see her as a good boss. They don't see her as a fair boss. They don't see her as someone who's particularly competent. Do you think that he views Ferrer that way, or do you think that he puts her up on a pedestal?
My read on it is that he idolizes her, but maybe he was putting on a show. I mean, he seemed to really put her on a pedestal and idolize everything she says and does. And in reviewing communications and other things that I've seen, he thinks very highly of her.
Did you get the impression that he is running that office himself, or that he's just doing what she tells him to do?
I feel so bad saying this because he really seems like a nice person, but I don't think he has the intellectual capacity to run that office. I think he's taking orders from somebody, and, he's, in my opinion, his role is to control and manage the reputation of Barbara Ferrer and the reputation of the LA County Department of Public Health. And so in doing that, he was trying to eliminate all dissent in every aspect. He admitted to going to the Southern California News Group and trying to get them to take down an op-ed by Human Hamati and Dr. Klausner that criticized, the return of the mask mandate. He wanted all of that information gone. He didn't want anyone in the public seeing anything that conflicted with Ferrer's message.
If he's a dim bulb and she doesn't know how to use the computer, is there a guru who's in that office who tells them what to do, or maybe outside that office who gives them ideas on how to handle all of this? Or is this just kind of the blind leading the blind, where they know they don't want free speech and they don't want to be questioned, and they're just kind of the Keystone Cops stumbling their way through everything?
I haven't figured that out yet, and that needs to be explored, because my impression of the two of them is that they're really not very bright, and they're not like strategic geniuses or anything along those lines. And it could be that they're just two dim bulbs who fell into a lot of power and abused it, or it could be something more sinister. I have not figured that out.
Why is it that they allowed some people to comment on some things but not other things? Was that done by design, where there was the nature of maybe the subject matter of a tweet where people could comment, and then others they deemed to be too hot or explosive to allow any sort of response? Did he get into that at all?
So they filed a motion for summary judgment, and in that motion they say any instance where the public has been allowed to comment was a mistake. And so we went through dozens and dozens and dozens of, quote, mistakes that they've made where they've allowed random posts to be commented upon. And then if you go to their Facebook page, they have 172 public reviews, which are all statements and advertisements from, like, there's an herbal cure for herpes and all sorts of investment schemes that you can get involved with. And it's just hilarious to compare the reality of what's on their social media pages with their stated policy and their goal of keeping the public well informed and not letting any misinformation come out of their sites.
So if all of the commentary that they allowed was them not knowing how to work the computer, Ferrer said she doesn't know how to use social media at all. She doesn't look at Twitter. She doesn't look at Facebook. She can't even run her own slide presentation when she's appearing before the county. Brett is the one that she screams at. Next slide.
Next slide.
There we go. He's the one with the clicker. She doesn't know how to operate the clicker. Does anyone over in that entire department know how to use the computer?
I think Brett is a little more adept with social media, but he also, in my questioning on the Facebook account, he didn't seem to know much.
I wonder if they hire an outside company, an outside consulting group to run some of this stuff, because I know some government agencies will do that. They'll go to an ad agency or they'll go to some Silicon Valley company that typically runs things. Do they have consultants over there?
They do. So they have a contract with Fraser Communications, and there's one other company that I can't remember at this moment. And also what I found really interesting was when Brett was initially hired in, I think, 2017, he wasn't hired directly as an employee of the county. He was hired through Superb Tech, which is a staffing agency. And that's why Brett's name didn't appear in Transparent California until, I think, 2020 or 2021, because he was working for a third party.
And then he moved over to LA Public Health at some point?
Yep.
I'll tell you, when you look back, because all of these incidents took place all around the same time. It was after the rest of the world had moved on from the mask mandates, and LA County was considering bringing them back. And a group of us fought it tooth and nail. They thought they had that board of supervisors wrapped around their little finger. And clearly something happened internally in county government where they started to lose their grip on the board, because the board had always backed her up. They always spoke about her, both to her face and when she wasn't there, in laudatory terms. I don't think she had lost any vote that went before the board, but when all of us got together and fought this ridiculous mandate that was not based in science and was so harmful to the population, particularly vulnerable populations like school children, this was the first vote that they lost. And I would imagine that they also looked at this at a very critical moment in time for their power within the structure of county government. And they saw themselves losing that power in real time. Did you get the impression from his testimony in the deposition that they looked at that moment in time as a very critical point for their power?
So he had been coached before the deposition, and I didn't get that from his testimony, but it's very clear in the documents. Because in the documents, you can see when he reaches out to Twitter, he says, "We are about to bring back a mask mandate, and all of these anti-maskers are harassing us, so we need you to help us." So it's clear that they, this is right around the time when the LA County USC doctors were doing their weekly town halls, and those were getting out. And I think that was the most damning thing, because health services is just another department under the same county umbrella. And these medical doctors with actual degrees in epidemiology are saying the exact opposite of what Ferrer is saying. And I think that really exposed the Department of Public Health as being completely incompetent and off base.
Last question before you go. We found the real doctors over at USC, Soothing This Wednesdays. It was posted on YouTube, but it was not promoted by the county. It was not promoted by the LA County Department of Public Health. And as you indicated before, they frequently put out contradictory information as to what Ferrer was putting out in the public domain. Because that was so hard to find, and because you really had to dig deep to find what these medical doctors were saying, did you find out if the LA County Department of Public Health was purposely trying to bury those videos?
I don't know if they were purposely trying to bury them. And Brett was very cagey around these issues, because I brought up that letter that Health Services sent out once the first video leaked. I don't know if you remember. It was like a hostage letter where they said, I know our doctor said XYZ, but COVID is still really scary. Don't give up your mask, blah, blah, blah. And so I asked him if he was involved in getting them to issue that statement or that letter. And he said, "Oh, no. And but then he admitted that his counterpart in Health Services sent that statement to him. without any prompting. And I could tell there's something deeper there that he wasn't revealing to me. So I know that they were involved in getting that statement issued.
Julie Hamill, attorney for the plaintiffs suing the L.A. County Department of Public Health, the fake Dr. Barbara Ferrer. You are doing God's work with this lawsuit. Thank you so much. I know you're putting in hours upon hours upon hours into this lawsuit, but if you don't do it, we won't find the answers, and they need to answer for what they did to the people of this county. It's uncomfortable for them, I'm sure, but the people of L.A. deserve answers, and you're the one that's going to get them for us. So thank you so much for everything that you're doing.
Thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it.
And you can follow Julie on Twitter at Hamill_law and find her online at laparents.org. Julie Hamill, everyone. We just spoke with Julie Hamill, who is the plaintiff's attorney suing the L.A. County Department of Public Health and the fake doctor, Barbara Ferrer.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, it's interesting to me what answers were provided by both the fake doctor and Brett Morrow, the communications officer for the L.A. County Department of Public Health. Because during that time, during the COVID-19 pandemic, when the state of emergency was on the books and the fake doctor had the power of God over all of us, she assumed that there was no end or limits to her power. Because of the emergency order and because of the sycophants on the Board of Supervisors, she thought she had nothing but green lights ahead of her and that she could do whatever it was that she wanted to do, and she would have public support, and there wouldn't be anyone who was a naysayer who had any kind of public platform. What she didn't understand was that there were people like you, people like me, people like Julie and Jennifer Van Laar and Roxanne Hogue, and Marla Tejas was showing up at all of those press conferences and asking salient questions and forcing them to attempt to justify their actions. And we just got loud enough to where people heard us. And that includes the L.A. County Board of Supervisors. We turned the heat up, and they couldn't handle life in the kitchen. And because they operate in such a bubble, because they only exist in these academic circles and these think tank circles and these foundation circles, where they only talk to people who see the world exactly like them, they didn't know how to respond to arguments that disproved what they were trying to do. Every once in a while, you'll see these baseball prospects who can hit the ball a mile. You throw a fastball anywhere near that home plate, and it's going to end up in the parking lot, and someone's going to have to go to Earl Scheib. But if you throw them a curveball, they can't hit it. And what we found out from the fake doctor and the people that work for her is that they couldn't hit the curveball. They couldn't deal with a group of people who were making the opposite argument in a sustained way and didn't shut up. And we had to fight a guerrilla war because they control all of the institutions. They control the county government. They control the L.A. County Department of Public Health. They control what you read in the Los Angeles Times. They control what you hear on the all news stations. They control so much of what exists in the public domain. But there are a few things they didn't control. They didn't control this radio station. They didn't control our competitor on the AM dial. They didn't control the op-ed page in the Southern California News Group, and they didn't control everyone on social media. And that drove them crazy. That drove them absolutely mad. And the more they'd stomp their feet and the more they'd try to restrict your ability to hear from us, the louder we got. And the louder we got, the weaker their argument looked. And ultimately, they had to back down. They had to back off their mask mandate that made no sense. And that bruised their ego because they didn't think they would ever lose. They thought they were the New York Yankees and we were the Mud Hens. And we beat them. You know, they say that you can have a football team that is much better than their competitor. You can have a spread that's way out of whack. You can have a team that's favored. You look at these college football games, first 3 weeks of the season, and you can have Florida Gators playing DeVry, and they're favored by 42 points. But you always play the game because any team can beat any other team on any given Sunday. And we played the game, and we beat them. We beat them because we had better arguments, and we beat them because we played the game better than they did. And no one deserves to lose more than the fake doctor. The fake doctor has inflicted a lot of damage to this county. And no one would stop her. But we did.